Hi everyone, this is Canon Master Isaac Steincamp from the Chess Summit Network, and for today's video I want to share a game I just played in the G29 Pennsylvania State Chess Championships. This was a really interesting tournament for me because even though my rating is about 2120 USCF, my quick rating, since I don't really play many quick events, is only 1799, so it made pairings very interesting and it meant that I got a lot of tough games. And this was a game I played in round 2 against someone who had a quick rating of about 2050, and I thought that this was, a reasonably instructive game because even though we were operating in a much shorter time control. From the white side of the board, at least, it really felt like I was playing like a long time control game with the quality of the moves I was playing. So I just wanted to share that with you guys this morning, and let's go ahead and get started. So I'm playing white, and we reach a Karpov system of the, let's get rid of that, Karpov system of the English, where black sets up a fairly standard developmental pattern and plays against white's Fianchetto setup. A lot of grandmasters think that this is the best way to combat the English, but in my opinion, without knowing all of the small details, it's really hard to get any sort of play with black because white has a pretty, clear plan. So I just developed normally. Here I could play bishop to g5, but I thought that, after h6, okay, I could take on f6, but I didn't really want to give up my pair of bishops on a short time control game. I'd be much more open to that in a longer time control game where I can use the knight on d5 a little bit more effectively. But I decided, with my opponent playing bishop to g4 and not exactly threatening d5, now was my time to compensate by getting space on the queen side. So I played a3. My opponent played a6. I like a5 a little bit more since it makes b4 have to be prepared by a move like rook to b1. But at the end of the day, I'm still getting space on the queen side. So b4, bishop to a7. And here I have a choice between bishop to b5 and bishop to b2. And here I decided that I wanted to play against the e5 pawn, using a c5 pawn break at some point. So let's see what I mean. So I played bishop to b2, and I'm already on the long diagonal. My opponent played queen to d7 with the idea of bishop to h3. But in reality, since I'm considering putting a piece on d5, I'm not really too worried about the possibility of losing my light squared bishop. So I just played e3. This e3 move is a really solid move because it makes this bishop on a7 have no targets. At some point, it really needs to go to b8 and get onto this diagonal, but as you can see, black has the problem that all of these pawns are currently on the diagonal, so he'll have to spend some time to relocate this bishop. So my opponent played bishop to h3, which wants to trade off the light squared bishops, and maybe in longer time control I might have inserted rook to e1 so I could play bishop to h1, but I really wasn't worried too much about this exchange because I'm going to get a lot of time to get counterplay. And I played this move queen to b3. After takes takes, you can kind of see the importance of queen to b3 because now this d5 break is impossible. Because now if he plays d5, obviously I've got 3 attackers, he only has 2 defenders, he would simply lose out. And without this d5 break, it's going to be very hard for black to get space. And as he realized here in the game, it's actually really difficult to find moves for black. Maybe a move that would be worthy of consideration is getting this rook off of a8 and into the center so that way he can play bishop to b8 and not cut off his own rook. But this is still, there's still a lot of work to be done to get this bishop to become an active bishop. So he played knight to e7, which already to me wasn't so clear what exactly he was trying to do, maybe with the exception of playing c6. But here, as I mentioned before, I want to use my bishop on b2 to target this e5 pawn. And I found this really nice move, c5. The idea behind this move c5 is that it's not exactly a pawn sacrifice, because if black takes my pawn on c5, I'm going to be able to take on e5. And if my opponent plays a move like queen to f5 attacking my knight, I can get this knight into the center, maybe with a move like knight to e2 followed by f4. I'm totally fine. Keep in mind, knight e2 also protects the d3 pawn, while also simultaneously protecting the knight because of the bishop on b2. Even though I have this kind of weak d3 pawn, I have 2 central pawns, my opponent has no central pawns, and it's not exactly clear how he's going to make progress. Now, objectively, taking now would have been better than taking later like he did in the game, but I still liked white's position a little bit. Keep in mind that this isn't quote-unquote winning for white. This is just a way to, I think, to play to an advantage. Because I think if white does nothing at this point, black will get, healthy play. By playing a move like c6, he's preparing d5, which will allow him to play bishop to b8. So I figured c5 would be a nice way to kind of stop him from doing that. And so here my opponent kind of lashed out a move after realizing he didn't want to take on c5 with this move b5. I guess he was expecting some sort of en passant and then being able to activate his bishop or open up the c-file. But just because there's quote-unquote tension in this position, the idea of being able to play c takes b6 doesn't mean that it's necessarily the best move, as I've mentioned many times in my different videos. And when I'm looking at this position, this b5 move, it doesn't actually change what's going on in the position. If anything, it makes a c6 square really weak. So this means that my opponent really doesn't know what he's doing. So without a clear plan, this is my opportunity now to put my pieces on the best possible squares. So here I played rook on f to d1. because at some point maybe I'll play d4, or maybe I'll play e4 and then d4 with the idea of opening up the d file. And my opponent felt this pressure and decided to try to go on the offensive with queen to g4. So he gets off of the d file, which is probably his main objective. But I wasn't really convinced by this queen to g4 move, so I inserted h3. He played queen to g6. Okay. Well, now he might be trying to play this move, e4, which is what I thought he might try to do when he played queen to g4. And so here I found it necessary to play this move e4. And even though there's this, weak square in d4, my opponent doesn't exactly have a convincing way of getting to it. Since knight to c6, I'll just play knight to e2, and I'm playing d4 again at some point in the near future. Not to mention, I've got full control of the light squares. So my opponent played knight to h5 with the threat of knight to f4 check, so I just responded knight to e2. My opponent played rook on a to c8, and again, this is kind of like a nothing move. He's only playing this because if I take on d6, he can open up the file, but I'm never taking on d6 for a couple of reasons. One, it opens up the file, meaning that my opponent gets more space to do what he wants. Two, this pawn on c5 is the only reason why this bishop on a7 is bad. Taking this pawn on d6 would be a positional blunder because the bishop on a7 would become extremely active. So, because my opponent got to do nothing this move, I get to spend another move improving my static advantage. So I played this move rook on a to c1. And here, my opponent really had a hard time finding a plan. He was already about 10 minutes down on the clock, and realized that he wanted to play this move f5. But the problem with this is that if he plays f5, obviously there's this pin of this from this queen on b3. And, another reason why I played this move was to also put pressure on f7. So he played king to h8. And here I decided to use this time to kind of harass the queen. Knight to h4, queen to g5. The queen's a little bit awkward here. And here I had an interesting deflection idea. d4, with the idea being that I'm obviously attacking the e5 pawn. f5 is no longer really good anymore because now I can start winning the center. So he took once, and instead of taking immediately on d4, I just played f4 with the idea of pushing the queen back to h6. Queen to f6 would obviously give bishop takes d4 with tempo, so queen to h6 was the best move. And already, as you can see, white space advantage has become much, much more. And with my opponent's inability to come up with ideas to activate this bishop, he's almost practically playing down a piece. A book that I've been reading lately that I would recommend to anybody here who's trying to be an ambitious chess player is Positional Play by Jacob Agard, who in the Grandmaster Preparation series. And chapter 2 is all about pieces. And one of the quotes that he quotes in that book is, "If you have one bad piece, you have a bad game." And in this case, having a bad bishop on a7 not only means he can't control any of these weak dark squares, it also means that it makes it easier for me to use the dark squares. So for example, when I played bishop takes d4, I now have full control over this long diagonal, and g7 is hit. So he plays d takes c5, hoping that I play bishop takes c5 and trade off bishops. Well, of course I don't want to do this. B takes c5. My opponent's bishop is still blocked in. My opponent played the move knight to f6 because his knight on h5 is not doing anything anymore. And because he's attacking e4, I decided that my queen on b3 is no longer placed correctly, so I played this move queen to f3. And here he played c6. And with about, I want to say, 12 or so minutes left on my clock, I found a really nice move here. And it's not a tactical move, it's a purely positional move. But I'm going to encourage you to pause your videos and try to figure out what move I played here. Because it's both prophylactic and it takes advantage over several weaknesses that I've already discussed in previous blog posts over at chess7.com. Okay, well, if you haven't figured it out yet, pause the video. But Black's idea of playing c6, I think, is twofold. One, he's kind of afraid of me pushing c6, which I'm probably not going to do. But more realistically, he played c6 to play this move bishop to b8. And bishop to b8 would, quote-unquote, activate the bishop. It's not really that convincing, but why give my opponent any play at all? And so with my next move, not only do I stop bishop to b8, I take advantage of something that Black created last move, which was a really weak square. When a pawn moves forward, it creates at least two weaknesses. And in this case, he weakened the d6 square. So here, by playing this move bishop to e5, my opponent is completely paralyzed, because now I'm playing bishop to d6 the next move, and I just have a really nice positional grip. He played rook on c to d8. I played bishop to d6. And here, my opponent didn't, for a lack of time, decide to give me the exchange, which unfortunately, almost loses immediately, but okay, what else can he do? Does he really want to play knight on f to g8 and allow this move knight to f5? I really don't think so. And after knight to f5, he's objectively already clearly worse. So he decided to give me the exchange, but the game kind of finishes quickly now. Bishop takes f8, rook takes f8, knight to f5, queen to g6. And here I play knight on e to d4 because there's no way to protect the c6 pawn. So he plays bishop to b8. knight takes c6, bishop to c7, and I really like my next move because it's anti-positional, but at the same time, my grip on the position becomes completely devastating for black, which is just a move knight to e5. And my opponent, at the risk of getting his queen trapped because of queen to h5, I have moves like g4, took on e5, which is the common sense move, but now after f takes e5, he realizes that this knight on f6 really has no squares. He could play knight to h5, but then I'm playing a move like g4, and then, okay, maybe I can't take this knight immediately, but when I move my king, where can this knight go, right? If he goes to e8, I'm playing rook to d8, and if he plays d7, obviously I can just take it. So he plays knight to g8, and here, there's just a simple preom here. Passed pawns must be pushed, and unfortunately there's nothing he could do to stop that. I just played c6, he played queen to e6, I calculated for a little bit, c7. If he plays queen takes e5, I just play rook to d8, and this position is lost. And if he plays queen to a2 check, it's not exactly a problem. I can just move my king to like g1, and again I'm threatening rook to d8. And my opponent only had like 30 seconds left, so he resigned in this position. But just to prove a point, it's already very difficult for black to find moves. His knights have absolutely no coordination. If this knight on c8 moves, I'm going to win a minor piece again. I'm already up in exchange. A trade of rooks will help me win, and perhaps I can already start thinking about a move like queen to f4, and then start targeting this g7 square. Perhaps queen to c3 would also be not such a bad move here, even in this position, maybe even queen to c3. But I also have to worry about this knight queen takes e4 check, so I wasn't really looking at that. But this is just absolutely devastating. Rook to d5 is also a possibility, and my opponent just had no squares, so he resigned here. I liked this game a lot because it took a position that was mainline. I didn't even play the best moves, in the opening because of the short time control, and I didn't want to, have to think about long-term strategy so much. So, for example, here when I played e3, I could have played rook to e1 and then bishop to h1, and this would have been fine. But I decided, just to go ahead and blockade the bishop. And that's one of the things about playing in shorter time controls. It's a lot less about pure calculation than it is about concepts. In this game, it was all about making sure that this bishop could never get life. This queen to b3 move made sure that in this position, my opponent couldn't play d5 and open up the position. When he played knight to e7, I played c5 with the idea that if he wants to open up his bishop, he's got to lose his e5 pawn. My opponent decided to not do that, and by playing a move like b5, the game quickly went out of control. Already in this position, I felt like I was in complete control over the game. So queen to g4, kind of a bluffing move, and then here it's just a matter of gaining space, optimizing my pieces, and at this critical moment, when my opponent's ready to come up with a dynamic breakthrough, it was me that was able to come up with the strategic plan of playing e4 and then f4, and now my opponent's plan of f5 makes absolutely no sense. So I really like this game a lot. I really thought that my opponent had absolutely no chance of coming back into this game, despite playing something that's considered a very logical, opening for black. So this is my video for today. Make sure to follow up my chesssummit.com posts on Tuesdays and Fridays. This is Isaac Steincamp signing off from the Chess Summit Network, and I hope you have a good weekend.